Dorothy Gale finds herself at the center of a deadly choice between two enemies to save Oz and the world over the rainbow. Will she make the right choice? Let's find out in Oz, Fall of the Emerald City #3 from Zenescope Entertainment. See you in 3. Welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of Oz, Fall of the Emerald City #3. But before we dig in, let's take a quick recap on what happened in issue #2. Dorothy Gale discovered that Polychrome is not a beloved goddess who returned to bring peace and prosperity to Oz. Instead, she's a goddess of sorts that escaped from a prison. And that prison, when she went to research what was happening and how she escaped, led Dorothy and her friends to the world on the other side of the rainbow, which is Oz's equivalent of heaven. When they got there, they found that pretty much the entire world or dimension or whatever you want to call it was essentially destroyed. That brings us to Oz, Fall of the Emerald City #3. We catch up with Dorothy Gale, Glinda, Adraste, Nicholas, and Toto when they're examining this world on the other side of the rainbow, and they find that the heaven of Oz is just nothing but a ruined wasteland. All the buildings are destroyed, and all the souls that should be there are now gone. The buildings look like they've been wrecked in some kind of cataclysmic battle, and all the colors of the world have been muted or sapped away. So they continue to investigate to find out what happened. Meanwhile, Polychrome is sitting on the throne of Oz as the new goddess and empress, but she's increasingly displeased and frustrated because the wizard and her soldiers haven't found Dorothy yet. When the wizard reports he's got a rumor, or at least a lead, that Dorothy is now over the rainbow and searching out Polychrome's history, Polychrome teleports the wizard to that same land and sends her soldiers with him to try and figure out what happened. Now the two enemies converge. Dorothy and her friends are continuing to search for the decimated world over the rainbow to find out how Polychrome escaped and what she had done. When the wizard shows up with all the guards teleported in through Polychrome's rainbow teleportation technology. But before a fight can break out, something interesting happens. The wizard uses all his now enhanced and boosted magic to destroy all the soldiers. And he explains he needs Dorothy's help to defeat Polychrome. Reluctantly, Dorothy and her friends say, well, we've got nothing else to do as far as figure out what's going on here, so we might as well go along with the wizard. The wizard magically levitates Dorothy and her friends to a cavern underneath the city where this device sits that looks like a large cylinder with a little doohickey on the top. The wizard explains that Polychrome was encased in the device for centuries because she was the power source for the land on the other side of the rainbow. When Polychrome pleaded for her freedom, she was denied, and then she got really angry and bitter, as anybody would be. And when she eventually escaped, she damaged the device so she could never be trapped again, and she imprisoned all the souls she can gather up in her staff to give her additional power. The wizard, although he's grateful for being resurrected, now recognizes that Polychrome is too dangerous to be left unchecked. So he comes up with a plan, and he goes to Dorothy and Adraste and Glinda and everyone else and says, here's what we're going to do. You repair the device. I will summon Polychrome here saying, I've got you cornered, but I need help. And then when she arrives, we'll all gang up on her, put her back in the device, and then the land over the rainbow will be restored. Polychrome will be back in the encasement, and everybody will be happy, and we can go on about our business. Unfortunately, there's a catch, and the catch is somebody with white magic skills will need to stay behind and watch over the encasement device to make sure that Polychrome doesn't escape and make sure the device stays in working condition. Wonder upon wonders, the plan works. The wizard summons Polychrome, who arrives saying, yep, okay, I'm going to help you capture Dorothy. But then they all turn the tables and gang up on her. There's a big fight. Polychrome constructs these magical color-based monsters to try and attack everybody. But eventually the good guys with the wizard get together. They force Polychrome back in the device, seal it up, activated it, and now the land over the rainbow has all its colors restored. Wizard breaks her staff and frees all the souls that have been captured, and now effectively everything's right with the world. But unfortunately, Glinda has to be the one that has to stay behind with her white magic skills to watch over the device, make sure that Polychrome doesn't escape. But before Polychrome is encased fully, she does give a warning. She says, don't trust the wizard. He's going to stab you in the back. And without spoiling too much of it, that prediction comes out to be true by the end of the issue. And that's it. That's the end of the issue and the end of the three-part miniseries. So let's talk about the technical aspects, starting with the character work. Overall, the character work's a little strange because of the way this situation turned out and what Dorothy and her friends had to do to get the conflict to come to a resolution. For example, Dorothy knows the wizard is not to be trusted, and yet when he shows up and says, "Hey, I'm going to help you catch Polychrome and we can all go about our business," she has to know this is a bad deal, but she just kind of goes along with it really quickly. Uh, Polychrome is bad news, but entrapping her in this cylinder case to power the city over the rainbow feels kind of like a strange version of torturous slavery, especially for all eternity. That doesn't sound like something Dorothy would be okay with, much less buy into as a plan. I mean, you always expect the heroes to kind of find the better path, to make the better choice. In this case, no, Dorothy just sort of goes along with the most direct choice, which is morally gray at best. I mean, this is a strange way to go about resolving your problems. And then lastly, when the team parts ways with Glenda, they're sort of smiling, but you're trying to just be happy to keep the situation upbeat, but not at all resisting what's happening to her, rather than saying, nope, we're not going to leave Glinda here. There's got to be a better way. They just sort of go along with it, taking the wizard's word for it that that's how it has to be, which we already know the wizard is not somebody to be trusted. So the whole way the characters are sort of responding and reacting to the situations in this finale seems very strange. So let's switch gears and talk about the artwork. So Iman Casales' artwork is bright, action-packed, dramatically constructed, using a good contrast between light and shadows. And if you're going to come up with a comic that sort of uses color as a foundation for magic, with all these wizardly things going on, this is about as good as you can imagine it, and pretty happy with the results so far. So thumbs up and kudos to Casales. Let's move over to talk about pacing and structure, where it gets to be a little bit of a mixed bag. David Wohl keeps readers thoroughly engaged with a lot of story in a relatively short period of time. The sequence of scenes makes sense. Wohl transitions the scenes well, and generally speaking, the conclusion is relatively satisfying, if not completely satisfying. And I'll explain that in a minute. The speed and the smoothness of the reading experience is undercut by just the amount of rushing that has to get done to get the end to the end of the story, to get to the finish line. We talked about the characters acting sort of inconsistently with their behavior, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And there's a lot of story here that should have been told to kind of make this situation feel complete that didn't. For example, why is the goddess trapped in this canister? And why is that canister that requires effectively the slavery of a magical-based individual needed to power Oz's version of heaven? Or how did Polychrome escape in the first place? What does the device do? There's a lot of obvious questions here that don't get answered because there's too much story for the number of pages, and it just doesn't get filled out. So it feels like you're rushing just to kind of give you the highlights of what's going on to get to the end of the story, but you don't get the complete picture. Switching over to talking about the theme of the comic and what it really says, it's basically the equivalent of choosing the lesser of two evils. Dorothy has to go along with the wizard's plan to stop Polychrome, but she should know, or at least she thinks she would know, that the wizard is somebody who's not to be trusted. The wizard and Polychrome are both bad guys. They're both people that cannot be trusted in any way, shape, or form. And yet Dorothy now has to choose to trust one to stop the other, and it winds up being a very bad deal all the way around. So the lesser of two evils is about as good as it's going to get. Final thoughts. What do we think about Oz Fall of the Emerald City #3? The three-part comes to a close with some twists, some magical battles, and an ending that changes the status quo for at least one character. In this case, is Glenda. Plus, there's a little bit of a to be continued cliffhanger at the end, which suggests there's going to be a follow-up. The script is brisk and engaging. It moves pretty well, but there's just so much story that needed to be told to make the story feel fully fleshed out and complete. And there's just not enough space to get there. So the ending feels a little bit rushed and not completely satisfying. Therefore, we're going to give Oz Fall of the Emerald City #3 from Zenescope Entertainment a 6.8 out of 10. Let us know what you think. Are you a fan of Zenescope's Oz stories? Do you think this is one of the better ones if you've been reading it or not? Let us know in the description how you feel about it. And if you disagree with this review, please let us know as well. I want to hear your comments about that. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining, and please stay tuned through the outro for the next review.